Hello, everyone. This is Kathy Kuntz at Cool Choices. I'm delighted you could join me today to talk about why we do what we do, incentives and motivation. This is one of my favorite topics in behavior change theory, so glad you could be here with me today for this. For those of you not familiar with us, Cool Choices is a nonprofit. We're located in Madison, Wisconsin, and our quest is to inspire individuals, businesses, and whole communities to adopt sustainable practices that reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So we're very much in that space of thinking about what it takes to motivate people to make a change. And today I want to start by having you do a little bit of self-reflection around this and think about how you make change happen or how you adopt and sustain practices in your own life. So first let's think about a very pleasant kind of thing. Being outside, running or biking or walking, and think about for a minute that maybe the last time you were doing one of those physical things out of doors and what motivated you to do that. Just kind of reflect for a minute on what motivated you to be there, what did it feel like to be there? Because in a sense, that's you adopting a practice that's good for you. Maybe to switch then to a practice that certainly for me is less joyful than biking. Think about household tasks. Maybe, I don't know, washing windows or scrubbing the floor or doing the dishes, some kind of household task. And what's the motivation there for you? Why are you doing what you're doing? And then to kind of round things out with maybe a slightly more pleasant task. Clearly, I'm not a very good housekeeper. You all know that now. Think about preparing a meal for your household and what the motivations are there. What motivates you to do those things? And, you know, as you're kind of reflecting on what you might say there, here's a variety of things that when I ask these questions to people, the kind of things they say, particularly about household chores, whether that's cleaning or cooking or other driving kids around kind of things. These are the kinds of answers I typically get from people about why they do those things, what motivates them to do those things. The thing I don't hear, and probably you didn't think about, is people don't say, well, I made a magnificent dinner because I got paid to do it. The kids all chip in $20 kind of thing. That's not, typically, financial incentives are not what motivates us to do these practices in our lives. It's much more either a sense of responsibility, part of our commitment to the other people in our community, etc. And so I want you just to kind of reflect on those two really different things as we get into these discussions today. So the reality is you as a sustainability professional are being asked to accomplish more faster than ever before. You know, the pressure to make big things happen really fast is extreme in our industry. And very probably as we see more and more climate-induced disasters around us, this pressure is going to get worse, not better. So it becomes really important for you to understand what it takes to motivate people to change. How do you flip that switch in other people so that they're committed to doing more faster too? And that's our topic today. We want to talk about motivation. I want to first give you kind of that basic framework of, you know, typically we think about how people are motivated as externally motivated or internally motivated. So extrinsic motivations are when some outside force is essentially in some way pushing you to do this. They're paying you to do it. They're requiring you to do it. Regulations are extrinsic motivation. You can only you are required to recycle or you are required to drive the speed limit. Those are external factors that are influencing your behavior. And ultimately, whatever that extrinsic force is, whether it's a regulation or an incentive that you're paid for doing that thing, it's in a sense transactional. If I do X, Y will happen. This is the agreement we have. If I read the book, I will pass the quiz. That's extrinsic motivation versus I want to read the book because I love learning about these things, kind of thing. So, okay, that's extrinsic. And of course, intrinsic is when those things are internally motivated. You're doing it because you enjoy doing it, because it's important to you, because you're proud of what you're accomplishing, which is why I started with those examples. You know, very often when I ask people why I'm a wannabe runner, and when I ask runners why they run, very often they're telling me stories about how proud they are of their running in one way or another. Their personal best, what they've accomplished, how it's improved their health. You know, it's something that there's this kind of internal commitment to, this is a good thing. I feel good about myself doing this. And this photo from our archives is always my favorite sense of this, you know, that it's this sense of accomplishment that feels really good. This woman is intrinsically motivated by recycling, okay? And that's that kind of magic, as opposed to she's recycling because someone is checking her trash to verify that she did it right. So let me kind of give you a sort of stand-up version of this. And I'm going to focus on financial incentives here because I think that financial incentives are the thing that we're so often attracted to doing. Let's give them an incentive if they do what we want them to do. And so, you know, financial incentives exist in part because it's really easy to measure progress when you use them. So for the first 20 years of my career, I was in the traditional energy efficiency realm where financial incentives are fundamental to what give rebates out for all kinds of things. Part of the reason you do that is because you can measure how many people are buying refrigerators if you pay rebates on those refrigerators. So it's easy to measure progress. It's also the case that financial incentives can make the sustainable option more affordable, and that's indeed the logic in the energy efficiency realm. It's if we buy down the cost of that efficient refrigerator, you'll buy it and take it home and save energy. That's affordability is a tricky thing, and it's clear that it doesn't make it affordable for everyone. It's not, financial incentives are rarely equitable. Everyone gets the same incentive, and so it doesn't necessarily make it affordable for everyone. I would just add there. The other thing that I think is really important to understand about financial incentives is there's sort of implicit in that a sense that I wouldn't do this thing if you didn't pay me to do it. And, you know, I've been haunted by that reality for a long time. So probably halfway through my career in energy efficiency, I was supervising an energy efficiency call center. And I remember one day a call center staff coming to me and saying, so I had this weird call and I don't know what I should have said to this person. And so a caller called us and said that he just bought a new computer and it was Energy Star labeled, and he wanted to know what we would pay him for buying it. So he was looking for his financial incentive. We didn't have financial incentives on computers at that point, and he was really upset by that. He told the call station person that he was going to take the computer back if we weren't going to give him a rebate for it. And it just really drove home to me how we taught this population that if you do this thing, if you buy energy efficiency, we will pay you to do that. There's no reason for you to do that otherwise. Now, the reality is we weren't paying incentives because all of the computers at that moment in time were meeting the Energy Star standard. There wasn't a logic to it. But he clearly felt that what the deal was that we'd created was that any time he bought an energy efficient product, we would pay him to do so. And that was the reason why he would buy it. If without that, he would not buy it. So that's kind of not the motivation I would argue you want thinking about aggressive sustainability goals. So, of course, I think you want to use intrinsic motivation, but the reality I have to acknowledge up front is it's a lot harder to inculcate intrinsic motivation because you've got to facilitate someone else feeling this rather than kind of the simplicity of writing them a check. At the same time, a huge advantage of intrinsic motivation is that it's more likely to persist. So if people do things because they think of themselves as the kind of people who do these things, I am the kind of person who turns off lights when I leave a room. Whether it's my room or not, I turn off the light if I am the last person out of a room. That's kind of core to my DNA at this point. I don't need someone giving me an incentive to do that. The other advantage of intrinsic motivation is if it's viral in a sense. If I am intrinsically motivated to recycle, it'll be much easier to engage me around composting because it's an extension of something that is already part of my DNA. So ultimately, we really want you to think about how much more powerful intrinsic motivation is, especially when we have these really big goals and we need people to do a lot of things very quickly. As I say that, I know some of you are thinking, okay, so no rewards ever? Is she nuts? What? How is that going to work? And I am not saying no rewards ever, and I'll talk about some ways that rewards can be really effective, certain kinds of rewards. But I do want to emphasize that money, financial incentives, complicates everything. And you know, I think still the best discussion of this is Daniel Pink's book, Drive, D-R-I-V-E, like a car, where he's talking about motivation, and he just makes really clear through numerous research studies how when you make something financial, you turn on a different piece of a person's brain. And it's really hard to have the kind of warm and fuzzy, this is what we're all doing together feeling simultaneous with the here's the cash payment feeling. And maybe the best example of this that behavioral economists talk about is the date at Thanksgiving example. So you've got John, this young man who has met Mary. He thinks Mary is very likely the love of his life, and Mary invites him to her house for Thanksgiving dinner. Mary's mother has this magnificent feast laid out for them, and at the end of the meal, you know, John really is trying to make a good impression. He thinks he's going to marry this woman, and so he says to Mary's mother, Mrs. Smith, this meal was amazing. I'm just so glad to be part of your Thanksgiving dinner. What do I owe you for what Mary and I ate tonight? Now, very probably in my story, John and Mary don't end up together because Mary's mom is deeply insulted by John offering her cash for her labor of love. And that is that financial thing. Okay, if we want to switch the thing on in people's brains that makes them passionately committed to being part of the climate solution in our organization or in our community, the way to get there is not to write them a check. That turns that piece off. So how else can you reward people? Well, of course, the most powerful way to reward them is through recognition. When you recognize people, when you say, Bill is doing an outstanding job leading the way on sustainable transportation in our community, or Ralph had an idea that's going to save us millions of dollars on our fleet costs here in our organization. When you hold people up as the epitome of what all of you aspire to be, that's really powerful. And that helps flick on that internal intrinsic motivation for people. We want to be the people that other people see us being. Okay, we have a huge need for consistency. So if you talk about how good of a job I'm doing biking to work, I'm going to bike to work more so that I live up to that recognition. And we often think, well, you know, these are adults. How much can recognition matter? I like to use this slide. This is a slide from, these are folks who worked at a law firm Cool Choices worked with probably 5 or 6 years ago now. And each of them won weekly recognition at this law firm. And what that meant is they got their photo taken with this trophy, and their photo was on the company intranet. They didn't get to keep the trophy. They didn't even get to keep the trophy for the week. I'm pretty sure it went back in the vault after the photo. But I want you to look at the way they're smiling, how good they feel about being the person who's recognized. Okay, that's that power that you want to tap into. I think sometimes when we feel a need for, but okay, I want to quantify savings, I want to somehow have some math in this, the thing I always suggest then is to think about how that can be about charity versus personal gain. Certainly, we worked with a lot of companies where in recognition of employee efforts, the company might give a sustainability grant to a local nonprofit that employees choose. Or a portion of the savings that we accrue go to some cause we all care about. You're then tapping into things that are important to me, things I want to make a difference on, rather than the kind of, I need to be paid to do this. Because ultimately what you're aiming to do here is to foster that shared identity. Not only do we need people to be intrinsically motivated to be more environmentally sustainable, but we need them to feel like that's part of their group identity here. People like us do things like this, is Seth Godin's famous saying here that I think is so powerful. That's, you want people to be intrinsically motivated and also to feel like that is a shared collective value. That's how we get to the kind of deep commitments we need to make the big changes we need to make. So with that, I have a little bit of time. Even though I love this topic, I managed to get through my slides pretty quickly. So we have a few minutes if people have questions about that. There is that little question box on your side GoToMeeting thing where you can type in a question. Oh, this is great. So hear what you're saying, but in my organization, we pay people for everything. How do we move away from that? It's a great question. Because we do have lots of cultures. The one I came out of in energy efficiency is a good example where we've always paid people to do these things. How could we think of doing something different? And I think one way to do it is to try to do a small pilot of sorts. I think about some of the organizations we worked with where leadership said to us, well, we have to have financial incentives for people, otherwise they won't respond. And we said, well, let's test that a little bit. Let's try something where we give people some recognition and see if they respond to that. And indeed, human beings are human beings, and you can break out of those cycles. I think you have to be deliberate about it, and sometimes you have to do things in a small way to get past the challenge. I think, and the other side of that is, of course, it's my example of the guy who called demanding his rebate and saying he wouldn't keep the computer if we didn't pay him to do so. The conversation I had with call center staff about that was really about how do we help him feel good about the choice he made, feel smart about the choice he made, and understand that there don't need to be incentives for everything. And so we worked in that case on some ways to, so when someone said, hey, I bought this Energy Star computer, to go, wow, that's great. Do you know Energy Star products typically have more features than non-Energy Star products in addition to saving energy? You probably got a really terrific deal. And trying to create some context where already that participant is a winner and a smart guy, even before we get to that issue of, are you going to pay me to do this? Because then we've moved the frame enough that it becomes a little bit weirder to insist that we need to pay you to do this if you did a thing that was brilliant and foresightful, kind of. With that, I am not seeing more questions. So knowing that you all have a tremendous amount to do of incredibly important work, I'm going to close things there. Thanks as always for everything you do to make our planet more sustainable. And feel free to reach out if you've got questions. Have a great day. Thanks so much for joining me today. Bye.